a very eventful life. He's a college engineering shop technician. He was born and raised in Easley, South Carolina. We all know him. We all love him. Please welcome Dr. Pepper.
Thank you. Ready? Is it rigged up?
Okay, so this year, I'm going to try and have some video. So please let me know in the back if you can't hear the video, because there's a British guy that says one of the best stories that kind of make this whole talk. Can everybody see that all right? All right, let's dive in. So, as seen previously, does anybody remember the first story I told back when I was stuck in southern Argentina, in Patagonia? Had to boil certain fluids to stay alive? Nobody? Okay. How about, what was the next one? The last year when I was on a plane and I ripped my shoulder swimming and some guy reached in and actually fixed a torn muscle. Anybody hear that one last year? Or the year before. Then last year was, went to Mexico with a convicted murderer, yeah, and we went to raise stuff under the ocean, so that was last year. So, trying to keep up with that, this year I'm going to talk about my last show I did. So if people don't know, I say it a lot, I apologize, but I've been on about 50 shows. Last thing I did is this story, and you'll know why it was the last I stopped. But big thing I did before this show was I tried to become the next Mythbuster. Whoa. So let me try and go back. Sorry, this is the first time I'm giving this talk, so it's going to be a little rusty. But as I competed for Mythbusters, I had the Indiana Jones, what's that hat called? The style. So it turned out the company that produces Mythbusters was promoting a new show. So this was one of the most fun things I did on Mythbusters, where you literally take a water heater, you remove 2 safety features, and you plug it back in. And so it's literally designed, all of our water heaters are designed, if they fail, they actually shoot themselves off the top of your house. And so that shows we had a dummy on top, the weight of a human, and it blew his head off. And so probably one of the most fun things we did for that series. But then that company reached back out to me and said, hey, you look like an Indiana Jones. We just got commissioned by Facebook Watch. Would you be interested in being in the Indiana Jones and actually get to use your PhD in geochemistry? So I was like, sign me up. So the whole thing is called Cursive Apicore, and it was kind of based on a semi-real story of some people that went missing. And it all kind of gets a throwback to this guy, Percy, that was like the original, real Indiana Jones who was trying to find a lost city of gold, which I'll show a picture of later. So they said, would you be interested in doing this? Month and a half, deep Amazon jungles, both in Peru and Brazil, and you would be doing some pretty fun stuff, working with the indigenous and trying to find gold. So we went for it. And so this was the group of 6 of us. There I am wearing the fez. In the pink, she was a jungle medicine doctor and a helicopter pilot. Right at the front was our tech expert. Back behind him is Meg Hines. She actually worked with Bear Grylls, so she was a survival expert. In the middle, retired FBI, and then on the end, an Irish journalist that had been a guy that stayed in the world's most dangerous prisons. So that was the team, and we were going to go into the jungle. This is Megan, basically what she really did, which was help out Bear Grylls. So she really knew the ropes, pun intended, because she would literally rig up all his rigging for doing climbing and rappelling, and still does. She's very, very successful. The whole story basically started from a German journalist, Karl Brugger. He wrote this book called The Chronicles of Akakor, and he thought it was based on a real tribesman from a lost city, and he said that basically all the buildings were gold, and all we had to do was use him as the paid-for guide to go back and find his lost city. So this German journalist just wrote everything down, wrote a book, and then got everybody pretty much in the world interested. This is back in the 70s. And so in his book, it showed all of these little squares are actually lost cities, part of his tribe. And so it was up to us to then go way back up into these tributary rivers, both down here in Peru and up there in Brazil, to try and actually look at the validity of that book. So Percy Fawcett, he died in 1925, and in fact, the story was he got deep into the Amazon jungle and was potentially both murdered and eaten. And what we had found out is we actually befriended some of these tribes that potentially had murdered him and or eaten him, and we bribed them with generators, boat motors, and food to this time not kill us and eat us, but hopefully show us some of these lost cities of gold. So there's even a movie out about it now, so it's still catching fame. So this is this lost tribesman, and this is one of his victims. And so after the book came out, people would write him, and he convinced them to bring your life savings, and I'm going to let you retire into the city of gold. And then when your back was turned, he would take something and then you'd be never heard from again. So this poor kid showed up with $30,000 in cash, disappears, nobody can find him, but then this guy all of a sudden gets a brand new boat for $30,000. And so we were actually checking his finances and all the trail as we made this show. These are two others that disappeared. He convinced her that he was going to marry her once they got to the lost city, and convinced him basically that he was a brotherhood friend and also needed to be part of the lost city. So all these poor people got duped. He took them out in the middle of nowhere, and they actually found remnants of bones, clothing, and jewelry. And this was our fearless leader. This is Jeff. Sadly, mid-production, Jeff got fired, disappeared. He's still alive though. But one of the hooks they brought me in on is this is Facebook. Potentially you'll get 1 billion followers with a B. So I thought this could be my chance to become a big social media top dog, and then basically springboard off of that. This is Matt. This guy was our lead camera guy, and he was fearless. He does stuff with crocs. He goes all over the world and does big animal filming, hunting, and now he actually does basically animal rescue. So this guy has done pretty much everything on Earth, and the camera guys are always the most bravest, right? They have to go in first, they have to hang the highest to get that right angle. So absolutely fearless. And these were our provisions. Our fearless surviving in the jungle, throw in water, boil it, eat it. So that was for everybody, a crew of about 20 of us. I was also brought in because they said we were going to get drones with LiDAR, and we were going to actually get through the jungle canopy. And then when I finally showed up, they lost the LiDAR, they lost the thermal, and so we literally just had a drone with a camera. So I was like, all right, this is starting to lose research and turn into a circus. So in the Peruvian part, first we went to Cusco. Has anybody ever gone to Machu Picchu? A few people out there. You have to go to Cusco first, and it's a tourist trap. So this budget hotel was, I think for each of us, it was about $600 a night. And we had to wait here for 2 weeks because we didn't have a lot of visas in place. So the money started basically pouring out of this production with nothing actually happening. Once we finally got our visas in order, we jumped into these Sprinter vans and we were off. And everything was actually pretty well taken care of. The funny thing was is we were all these experts, but actually there were safety experts. And so these guys hanging over here on the end were actually the true safety guys. They never got any billing, but they were the ones that were literally there to kind of save lives if it needed. First thing we did was go to one of the indigenous, and so this was them putting on a little kind of a ceremony. But that's what kind of started it, and then we were off. So this shows what the river was like. So you gotta realize we're going up tributaries. These are dugout canoes with either solid logs or old boards. And they have this like weird engine. It's not a normal outboard, it's a straight shaft. And it's a straight shaft because if you had a normal outboard, you literally hit rock after rock after rock. So this kind of shows you guys some of the conditions we went up. So that's us setting up to go up the river. Next, you're going to hear a lot of noise as we're trying to go up the really tiny tributaries. So this is my boat here. But you can see how shallow it is now. Literally, we're in inches of water, and we had to go about 30 miles like this. And so here we are completely grounded. So we literally have to now take the river rocks out of the river.
We're in the center of the rapids here. Before we leave boat, we're trying to make way for everybody coming up. This is an epic journey.
That's a little tongue in cheek. So here you can actually see we started, I don't get my cursor, but you can basically see the little thumbtack, and that's where we're trying to go. We're trying to go up that little tributary. And so we finally get to these carvings, and then they turn to me and say, what do they mean? I was like, you guys hired a geologist, not an anthropologist. And so literally on camera, they're like, make something up. And it had better have something to do with the lost city of gold. So it was a day of me pretending I was an anthropologist. One part of that bit of the expedition to Peru, we did have a guide that said he had found a slab of granite that had some of those carvings in it. And so I threw this in there as a marker, but there was one place we saw, both with satellite imagery and drone photography, that we saw something that mimicked what we thought was an image in that original book. But we'll talk about that in a minute. It turned out it was a bit too expensive to get in there. But here's my driver in another leg. So we'll see what he had to go through. This is literally over a week of this every day, 12-hour days. And all the people there had a giant wad of coca in their mouth. And so everybody was chewing on coca. It helped get you through the day. So the scary part though is in the Amazon, any rain literally gets funneled in the river. So literally we were camped, we all had hammocks, and then in the middle of the night, the river rose by 20 to 30 feet. And so all of a sudden, I thought I was about 30 feet above river, and I looked out my hammock and I was looking at the river rising. Not a big deal, but you gotta realize that there's these things called bullet ants. If anybody wants to scan the QR code, it is the most painful bite in theory in the world. It feels like you've been shot by a bullet. And I was telling them, if I get bit and it's on camera, my hourly rate doubles. So I wasn't completely against getting bit by a bullet ant. And so here we basically are trying to get the crew back together in the middle of the night, and this is what it looked like the day after.
Now the river's halfway down, but you can see the level at which it rose last night with the flood. Everybody's just having breakfast, sun's come out. So now we're trying to figure out what is next.
All right. So basically, Peru was a bust. Couldn't hire the helicopter, couldn't get into that area where we knew the slab was. So we headed up to Brazil. In fact, we headed up the Amazon to the Rio Negro. And this we did in style. So we had 3 of these giant boats. And one of these boats were for us 6, the people in front of the camera. The other boat was for all the camera crew, so the people behind the camera. And the third boat were for all the producers, executives, the directors, and the safety people. So this is when we really started to bleed out money. And this part of the leg, we actually ran out of our $5 million budget. So luckily though, we had armed guards. In Rio Negro, there's a lot of pirates. And so every one of these guys actually has either an exposed weapon or a hidden one. I had recently did this Atlantis series, and in Egypt there was an attempt to take me hostage. So I got surrounded in Egypt and they tried to take me for a ransom. So I was super glad to see people with guns. Everybody else was a little unsettled. But literally these guys literally stayed up on the deck all night, every night, to make sure we didn't get any visitors. So here we can basically see that pin where it's pretty remote. And so pretty much every night we had a party. When we weren't motoring, it was all catered. Pretty great times. This is one of our boats. The camera crew being pretty strange. I don't know if you guys ever go back to the movie, but they called their boat the Black Pearl. You can see it in the front. And they were rarely sober. If they were not behind the camera, they were not sober. So here you can actually see the Black Pearl motoring up the Rio Negro. This is one of their worst periods. Not collapsed over, they lost 2 drones. And this was the year where the real Negro was in drought period, so we had exposed sandbars, so actually getting up the river was extremely difficult. So this shows you basically what should have been about 20, 30 feet underwater. And so the struggle was getting all our boats and all our gear as far as we could up to the tallest waterfall in Brazil. And so one thing they had to do, and this is kind of insane talking about losing money, they put that fuel truck on a barge and pushed it with a tug until they ran aground and then put it basically at that town. And then they hired this helicopter, I think it was like $3,000 an hour for a month. And then they would use that to ferry us in. The craziest trip, they used one trip just to bring us watermelons. So, pretty strange. That was us basically before we headed off to this highest waterfall. And there it is. So that's the biggest waterfall. And so we were going to hang Megan off a rope. And she was going to look into a cave to see if that was truly the entrance to this guy's lost city and his lost tribe. So, in order of time, we got a motor on. So this is basically Meg hanging off the cliff. You can see her right down there. And this waterfall is at the mercy of the wind. So it's falling, I think it's almost half a kilometer vertically. And so she's trying to do her piece, looking in that cave, trying to see if they see any signs of a civilization. And then complete whiteout. So we lose Meg. So now the entire river is pouring onto Meg. And we have to do a rescue to basically try and get her out of there. And so, because we have a lot of money, we also have power and winches. So we quickly bring her up, get her out of the torrential river pour. But the interesting thing is these guys were actually a British, extremely remote rope crew. And so they were up there in the worst times. And this is kind of the crux of my story, is how dangerous this place was. Extremely remote, only there by helicopter. And they get stuck in a crazy storm. Do we have time for this little video? How am I doing on time? All right? Okay, so I'm gonna play this. He's British. If you haven't heard Brits before, they have a strong accent, so hopefully you guys can get through it. Here we go.
So what's been happening while you guys have been bringing up the waterfall?
Well, I'm not doing manual. So, yeah, we've got some crazy weather. We've got a lot of storms, we've got a lot of rain, we've got the river literally going from this level, which is kind of the lowest, to go another level. And like in 3 hours it went like to 8 foot, we nearly lost everything over the side. And then the other night we were at camp, we were just all getting settled, we had our food, and we saw the lightning in the distance. It started like rumbling, it was getting louder and louder. And then the rain came, and it was just torrential. And all our tops were collapsing, the guys' hammocks were soaking wet, so we moved everything. So I was sorting out my hammock, my tarp, and my hammock trying to stay dry. And I was also trying to collect some rainwater in my bowl. And then the loudest thunder and lightning flash at the same time. It literally hit our camp above it. And it obviously went down through the top, down through me, hit my legs. My legs just went into like an almost just unbelievable cramp and just gave way. And I was just laying on the floor. The lad's down on the floor. It was in agony. It was absolutely killed.
So what happened to a porter?
The following day we had another strike, and it was this really sort of chewy, how the guy who reported his sound is so funny guy. And he was saying, he said he was sorting out his tarpaulin over his hammock, and he was bent down like this, and he was like tying a knot, and the lightning struck, and he said he went down the top, threw his arms, and then threw his arms. Oh boy.
Was he alright?
He hasn't done a shit since.
Did you guys hear that okay? So, lightning went through the guy. So, that was kind of illustrates how dangerous this whole thing. This guy here was another cameraman. He was the one that was actually hanging off the cliff to film Meg, another fearless camera guy that could do anything. So we had another cave entrance. We basically had to climb underground and look for a lost city. We also looked for bodies in here. I won't go into the video, but basically down here in the cave, we had a bunch of pit vipers. And so you get bit by one of these, you're dead in 10 minutes. And we also had a bunch of giant, the largest tarantulas called the bird spiders. But there are also times of magic, so check out the butterflies. So there was a period where the river was just inundated with butterflies. And so there were times where it was just absolute magic. We could forget that we were out there actually looking into murders. And then another crazy time, we saw 3 jaguars.
3 jaguars crossing the river. Don't go too close. Don't go too
So here you can see the jaguars swimming across the Rio Negro, and then they disappear back in the jungle. So extremely rare sightings. And then for me as a geologist, we had these weird structures, and so they had to ask, is this natural or man-made? And so this was part of my thing, was buzz around this guy and see if it was a Lost City-esque thing. So here's the bird tarantula. We all good on time, or should I fast forward? I can't see. What? Okay. So one more story? All right. Here we go. Here's your introduction to a bird spider.
So this is a bird spider. It's definitely related to tarantula, but it gets way bigger. 2 cool things I found about it today is that wherever it walks in the jungle, it actually leaves a trail of webbing, almost like breadcrumbs. When it wants, it can follow that web back to its nest, piss it off, and then start ruffling its hairs and throwing them in the wind. And if you get them on, they're toxic. They'll get your skin, they'll get your eyes, you breathe them in, you got big issues. But what's crazy is it's totally chill. This one's been here for about an hour, been feeding it little snacks, a little bit of coffee, as long as it's cool, all good.
And those guys were everywhere. I think on one day we saw half a dozen. They're always just cruising. But we had a failed expedition, and I throw his image in here because every expedition he ever had was failed, and so they never found the lost city. He was never returned to his lost tribe, but people disappeared. And so in that vein, we never got back to that area called Inca Hack. And the biggest reason was there was only one helicopter in the entire area. So southern South America, that helicopter was $12,000 an hour. And so production was like, you're blowing through 5 million, we're not gonna fund it. So we couldn't actually find a potential thing that would have tied any of that book back to real ancient civilizations. What gets even more weird is we completely ran out of 5 million in the middle of the whole shoot. And so we went on strike on a boat, and we waited and waited, and we were forcing Facebook to give us another 2 million to finish the production. And so if you ever watch the series, the edit basically ends as we are on a boat trying to solve the murder. So another failed expedition on a long list starting all the way back from Percy. So this kind of shows you what it was like in the jungle, lots of bug bites, head to toe. And then getting back to my billion followers, you can see my professional Facebook page. I gained 539 followers. Rotten Tomatoes, we don't even have a score up top. And in IMDb, we got a whopping 6.4 rating. So, that is why you see me here today. And I came home to my daughter Nazca, and she had a gift for me on the wall, a nice mural. And that was another reason why they hired me for this trip, was because for my PhD, it was a motorcycle trip. And this is exactly the time where we got the name Nazca for her, because this was wiped out on the Nazca lines. And her mom at the time, with no kids, was like, that's a cool name. And I was like, please get the motorcycle off my legs. But that's how she got the name. And that kind of wraps us full circle as to why I was down in South America. Thank you.